The restaurant was bathed in a warm, golden glow, the kind that made everything seem softer, more intimate. Waiters in crisp white shirts wove through the room, refilling wine glasses and delivering plates adorned with gourmet perfection. Laughter and polite conversation hummed in the background, the perfect setting for a celebration. Rachel sat across from me, smiling, swirling the deep red wine in her glass with an elegance she had perfected over the years. She was radiant tonight, soft curls falling over her shoulders, her lips painted a shade too daring for the occasion, but she knew she could pull it off. After all, this was our anniversary, and she wanted to play the part of the devoted wife perfectly. "To us," she said, raising her glass. I smiled, but didn't lift mine. Instead, I pushed my chair back and stood, reaching into my pocket for the small remote I had been carrying all night. "Before we celebrate," I said, my voice calm, measured, "let's watch a little surprise." The large projector screen at the front of the restaurant, the one normally reserved for wedding slideshows or company presentations, flickered to life. I had made sure it would capture everyone's attention. The guests turned toward it, intrigued. Rachel, still holding her glass mid-air, frowned slightly, her eyes darting toward me in confusion. Then the footage began to play. It started subtly. A grainy security camera angle of a hotel lobby. Rachel, wrapped in a beige trench coat, walked briskly through the automatic doors. The timestamp in the corner showed a date from just last week. The camera cut to an elevator feed where she stood with a man, her fingers brushing against his sleeve as she laughed at something he whispered. Then the final scene. Rachel slipping into a hotel room, the same man following closely behind, the door clicking shut behind them. A ripple of gasps echoed through the room, Rachel's face drained of color. My voice cut through the stunned silence. "Happy anniversary, sweetheart." She turned to me, her eyes wide, her lips parting as if she might conjure up some excuse, some desperate lie. But there was no talking her way out of this. The evidence was undeniable. I had known for months. I had watched as she crafted her little deception, deleting messages, using fake names in her contacts, thinking she was so clever. She thought she was always in control. She never saw this coming, and that made it all the more satisfying. Rachel's hands trembled slightly as she set her wine glass down, the soft clink against the table lost beneath the murmurs spreading across the restaurant like wildfire. Every guest, every friend, every business associate of ours now knew the truth. Her carefully curated image of the devoted wife, the woman with a perfect marriage, was disintegrating before her eyes. She tried to speak, her lips forming silent words, but nothing came out. The weight of dozens of eyes on her, judging, whispering, tearing through the facade she had built, was suffocating. I remained standing, my expression unreadable, watching her with a quiet patience. I had no need to yell, no desire for theatrics. The evidence had spoken for itself. I simply let her absorb it, let the reality crash into her like a wave she couldn't escape. Across the table, Rachel's best friend, Olivia, had gone pale, her fingers gripping the edge of the table as if she wanted to sink into the floor and disappear. She had known, not all of it maybe, but enough to be complicit. Her eyes darted between Rachel and me, silently pleading for this to end. Rachel finally managed to find her voice, though it came out as a strangled whisper. "Eric." I tilted my head slightly, waiting, curious to see what excuse she would attempt to spin. Would she claim it was just a misunderstanding? Would she pretend this was some old footage, a moment from the past that somehow resurfaced? She swallowed hard, then forced a weak laugh, desperate to regain control. This isn't what it looks like." A sharp chuckle escaped me, a sound that carried across the stunned room. "It isn't?" I echoed. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what it is. You sneaking into a hotel with your business partner, or should I say, your lover." More whispers. A man near the bar muttered something under his breath, shaking his head. A couple sitting 2 tables away exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from amusement to disgust. Rachel's breath quickened, her chest rising and falling as panic set in. She had always been good at lying, at manipulating, at painting herself as the victim in any situation. But not this time. The weight of undeniable proof left her with nowhere to run. She glanced around, her mind scrambling for an escape route, for some way to salvage what little dignity she had left. But every face she met carried the same expression: betrayal, disappointment, amusement at her unraveling. My voice remained calm even as I twisted the knife deeper. You thought you were so careful, didn't you? Deleting messages using fake names, covering your tracks. But the thing about deception, Rachel, is that it always leaves a trail. And I've been following yours for months. Her jaw tightened, her eyes glistening as tears threatened to spill. Eric, please, she whispered, voice breaking. Can we talk about this privately? I took a slow breath, as if considering it, then shook my head. No. You didn't keep it private when you decided to sneak around behind my back. You didn't care about discretion when you met him in hotels, when you laughed at my expense, when you made a fool of me. So why should this be private now? She opened her mouth again, but no words came. There was nothing left to say. Then the final blow landed, not from me, but from someone else. A sharp, incredulous voice sliced through the tension. God, Rachel, you are disgusting. The words came from her younger cousin, Sarah, who had always idolized Rachel, had always believed she was the picture of class and elegance. But now her face was twisted in revulsion, her hands clenched into fists on the table. I can't believe you. I defended you. I told everyone what a perfect couple you and Eric were. And this is what you've been doing? Rachel flinched as if she had been slapped. That was when the whispers turned into something worse. Soft murmurs became louder conversations. Laughter, bitter and mocking, rippled through the guests. People who once admired her, who sought her friendship, were now turning away, shaking their heads. She was losing them, all of them. I reached for my glass, finally lifting it in a slow, deliberate toast. To truth, I said, my voice carrying across the room. To consequences, and to the anniversary you'll never forget. Then, with measured ease, I took a sip and placed the glass back on the table. Rachel sat frozen, her face crumbling, realization dawning that no matter what she did next, there was no undoing this. The damage was already done. Rachel's breathing had turned shallow, her chest rising and falling in uneven bursts as she stared at me, the color in her face fading with every passing second. For the first time in years, she was speechless. Not the carefully calculated silence she used when she wanted to make someone else feel small. No, this was real, raw, unfiltered fear. The whispers in the restaurant had grown into murmurs, conversations happening at every table. Some of the guests tried to keep their voices low, while others made no effort to hide their amusement at her downfall. The sounds blended together, a symphony of judgment, betrayal, and, worst of all, satisfaction. Because this wasn't just a scandal. This was karma unfolding before their very eyes. Rachel's eyes darted around the room, scanning for allies. Olivia, her ever-loyal best friend, had shrunk into her chair, her lips pressed into a tight line. She looked torn, clearly horrified, but unwilling to go down with the sinking ship. Then there was Michael, her boss, who had always favored her, always invited her to exclusive work retreats. But now, even he was shaking his head, his face etched with disappointment. And then there was Sarah, her younger cousin, still glaring at her with unrestrained disgust. Rachel had spent years mentoring her, teaching her how to navigate the social circles, how to present herself as the kind of woman others envied. But now, Sarah's eyes were filled with betrayal. The admiration she once had was gone, replaced by something far more painful: disappointment. Rachel turned back to me, her lips parting, desperate to salvage something, anything. Eric, she started, her voice barely above a whisper. Please, can we... I didn't let her finish. Can we what, Rachel? My voice was calm, steady. Can we go home and pretend this didn't happen? Can we erase the footage? Can we pretend you didn't throw away our marriage for some cheap hotel room rendezvous? Her mouth opened and closed, no words coming, because we both knew the truth. There was no way out of this. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice so that only she could hear. I wanted to confront you for months, Rachel. Do you know why I didn't? I gave her a moment to process before continuing. Because I wanted you to keep going. I wanted you to dig your own grave. And look at you now, she shuddered. I stood straight, adjusting the cuffs of my shirt as if this were just another business meeting. Do you remember the conversation we had last year, I asked, my tone almost casual? The one about betrayal? Rachel blinked, clearly trying to grasp what I was referring to. I gave her the answer. You told me that trust, once broken, is impossible to rebuild. That when someone cheats, it's never just a mistake. It's a choice. a selfish, deliberate choice. I let those words sink in, watching as realization dawned in her eyes. She had said those words once, confidently, when we had been discussing a friend's divorce. Back then, she had spoken with certainty, with conviction. She had said she would never tolerate betrayal. And now, she was the one begging for understanding. The irony was delicious. A waiter hesitated near our table, unsure whether to clear the untouched plates of food. His eyes flickered between us, and I gave him a small nod, signaling that we were done here. He quickly removed the plates, his hands shaking slightly, as if he had been afraid to interrupt the scene unfolding before him. Rachel's hands gripped the edge of the table now, her knuckles white. "Eric," she whispered, her voice barely holding together. "We can fix this." I exhaled softly, shaking my head. "No, Rachel, you don't fix something you deliberately destroyed." She blinked rapidly, as if trying to keep herself from crying. Rachel never cried in public. She had always been too proud for that. But now I could see the cracks forming, her carefully curated persona unraveling in real time. She reached for me, just a small movement of her hand, but I leaned back, denying her the comfort she sought. I turned to the crowd now, my voice carrying through the room. To anyone here who still considers Rachel a friend, an associate, a trusted confidant, ask yourselves something. I gestured toward the screen, which was now frozen on the final frame of her betrayal. If she could do this to me, her husband of 10 years, the man she vowed to love and respect, what do you think she'd do to you? A collective hush fell over the room. Rachel gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. That was the moment she understood. This wasn't just personal. I wasn't just ending our marriage. I was making sure she had nowhere to run. She had always cared about her reputation more than anything, more than honesty, more than integrity, more than me. And now, that reputation was in ruins. I slid my chair back slowly, standing tall. I won't waste another minute on this. My voice was firm, resolute. Enjoy the rest of your evening, Rachel. With that, I walked away, leaving her alone at the table, surrounded by the wreckage of her perfect little world. The whispers turned into murmurs again, then into full conversations. I heard someone laugh, a cruel, sharp sound that made Rachel flinch. She tried to stand, but her legs wobbled. For the first time in her life, she had no control, and that was the best part of all. As I stepped outside, the crisp night air hit me, fresh and freeing. My car was parked just down the street, but I didn't rush. I wanted to savor this moment. I had imagined this night for months, but reality had been even sweeter than the fantasy. Rachel had thought she was the mastermind, the one always in control, but in the end, she had only been playing right into my hands, and she never even saw it coming. The restaurant doors swung shut behind me, sealing off the chaos inside like the final act of a play. The cold night air wrapped around me, crisp and biting, but it felt good. It felt cleansing. The tension that had been building inside me for months was gone, lifted off my shoulders like a weight I had carried for too long. I walked slowly down the sidewalk, hands in my pockets, letting the moment sink in. The city buzzed around me, cars passing by, neon signs flickering, the distant hum of music from another restaurant down the street. But none of it mattered. For the first time in months, I wasn't consumed by suspicion, by doubt, by the gnawing feeling that something was happening behind my back. No. Now, Rachel was the one drowning in uncertainty. I had left her there, sitting in the wreckage of her lies, surrounded by the very people she had spent years impressing. The whispers wouldn't stop. The judgment wouldn't fade. She had built her life around control, around the illusion of perfection, and in one night I had shattered it beyond repair. I reached my car but didn't open the door right away. Instead, I turned back toward the restaurant, watching through the large front window. Rachel was still at the table, frozen in place, her hands gripping the tablecloth as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. The screen that had exposed her had gone dark now, but it didn't matter. The damage had been done. A group of women at a nearby table were whispering behind their hands, casting sideways glances in Rachel's direction. One of them, a woman I vaguely recognized from one of Rachel's charity events, leaned toward another guest and shook her head, mouthing something that made Rachel flinch. Her best friend Olivia had her phone in hand, furiously typing, probably texting Rachel, probably trying to find a way to save face. But there was no saving this. The evidence had been undeniable, the betrayal too blatant to be ignored. Then there was Michael, Rachel's boss, who had pushed back his chair and stood up, adjusting the cuffs of his suit jacket. He walked past Rachel without so much as a glance in her direction, heading for the exit. A few moments later, he stepped outside, catching sight of me. For a second, he hesitated, as if unsure whether to speak, but then he walked over, stopping just a few feet away. "Eric." His voice was low, measured. I met his gaze. "Michael," he exhaled, shaking his head. "Damn, that was—" He trailed off, running a hand over his neatly combed hair. "I don't even know what to say." "There's nothing to say," I replied simply. Michael studied me for a long moment. "I had my suspicions," he admitted. "She always played it off like she had the perfect life, but there were cracks. I just didn't think she'd be dumb enough to get caught like this." He let out a small, dry laugh. "Well, I guess she underestimated you." "They always do," I murmured. Michael glanced back through the window, watching Rachel as she rubbed her temples, no doubt feeling the crushing weight of humiliation. "She's done," he said, almost to himself. "The board is going to eat her alive after this." I arched a brow. "That bad?" He nodded. "Rachel's reputation is everything to her. And in our industry, public humiliation like this doesn't just go away. People remember. She's been trying to climb the corporate ladder for years, but after tonight," he shook his head, "she'll be lucky if they don't push her out completely." I hadn't even considered the professional fallout, but now that he mentioned it, it made perfect sense. Rachel had built her career on trust, on being seen as polished, poised, and in control. And now? Now she was nothing more than a cautionary tale. Michael glanced at me again, as if debating whether to say something else. Finally, he clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You handled that like a pro, man." I smirked. I planned it like one too. With that, he gave me a nod and walked away, disappearing into the night. I turned back toward the restaurant one last time. Rachel had finally stood up, her legs unsteady as she grabbed her clutch. She wasn't making eye contact with anyone now, just keeping her head down, her once confident posture crumbling under the weight of her disgrace. She had always walked into rooms like she owned them. But tonight? Tonight, she was slipping out the side door like a thief who had been caught in the act. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my messages. There was one from Rachel. "Eric, please, we need to talk, just you and me. Please don't let it end like this." I let out a slow breath, my thumb hovering over the screen. Then I pressed delete. She had already said everything I needed to hear, and now there was nothing left to say. I got into my car, shut the door, and drove away without looking back. Rachel was on her own now. For the first time in her life, she was truly alone, and I had never felt more free. I drove in silence, the city lights flashing past me in a blur, but my mind wasn't on the road. It was still back at that restaurant, back in that moment where everything had finally unraveled. For months, I had lived in the shadow of doubt, in the cold, silent knowledge that my wife, ex-wife now, was betraying me. I had watched, waited, collected every piece of evidence, never confronting her, never letting her know just how much I had seen. Because it wasn't enough for me to simply know the truth. She had to know it too. She had to feel the weight of her choices, not just in private, where she could twist the narrative and paint herself as the victim, but in public, where there would be no rewriting history, no more lies, no more manipulation, just cold, undeniable truth. And now it was done. Rachel was humiliated, exposed, stripped of everything she had spent years pretending to be. She had always been the woman who played the game best, always one step ahead, always in control. But the thing about people like Rachel is that their arrogance blinds them. She never saw me coming. The thought made me smirk as I pulled into the parking garage of my apartment building. I had already arranged for my things to be moved out of our shared house weeks ago. I wasn't going to waste another second in a home that had become nothing more than a crime scene of broken vows and betrayal. I took the elevator up, stepping into the quiet sanctuary of my new place. It was modern, sleek, mine. No lingering memories, no scent of her perfume clinging to the air, no reminder of what I had lost, because I hadn't lost anything. She had. I tossed my keys onto the counter, pulled out my phone, and scrolled through the missed calls. Rachel had called 4 times since I left the restaurant. I played the latest voicemail, her voice shaking on the other end. "Eric, please, I know I messed up, I know I hurt you, but you didn't have to do that to me, not like that. People are talking, Eric. I can't. She cut herself off with a shuddering breath. Please, just call me. We need to fix this. We can fix this. Just call me back. Fix this? I let out a short, humorless laugh, shaking my head. Rachel had spent over a year carefully constructing her web of deceit, convincing herself that she was untouchable. And now, only now, when the world had turned on her, when the mask had slipped and there was no saving face, she suddenly wanted to fix things? She wasn't sorry for what she had done. She was sorry she got caught. I deleted the voicemail without hesitation. Rachel had spent so long underestimating me, believing I was too blind, too trusting, too passive to ever fight back. But she forgot something crucial about me. It'll confront, execute, and now there was nothing left for her to bargain with. Her reputation? Shattered. Her career? Hanging by a thread. Her social circle? Turning their backs on her one by one. Her marriage? Gone. She lost everything. And me? I walked away clean, untouched, free. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in months. I made coffee, watched the sun rise from my balcony, and let the reality sink in. I had won. There was no guilt, no second thoughts, just peace. I knew Rachel would keep calling, she'd keep texting, she'd beg for a meeting, for some kind of resolution, because that's what manipulators do when they realize they've lost control. But I wouldn't answer. She was nothing more than a voice in my past now, a lesson learned, a cautionary tale of what happens when someone mistakes silence for weakness. As I took my first sip of coffee, my phone buzzed with another message. Rachel, I just need to see you one more time, please. I stared at the screen for a moment, then typed 2 words. No reply, and with that, I blocked her number. The last thread connecting us was gone. I set my phone down, stretched, and let out a slow breath. Life was just beginning. And Rachel? Rachel was just realizing that her life, the life she thought she had, was over.